My name is Masood ibn Sulaiman Abdul-Haqq. And Sulaiman Abdul-Haqq is my father. His name was Sulaiman Abdul-Haqq when I was born. A lot of times when I tell them my name, people say, no, like, what was your name before? When did you become Muslim? Or, no, like, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Atlanta. And they say, no, like, where are you from, right? And I'll be like, I was born in Fort Worth, Texas. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say, But we do exist, right? Like, Black American Muslims do exist. We have been here for a long time. And all of us did not come through the Nation of Islam. We didn't all wear bow ties. We didn't all sell newspapers on the corner and grapes and things of that nature. We didn't all believe that Elijah Muhammad was a prophet at some point. That's a misconception. So one of the reasons that I wanted to write the book was because I understood that our experiences will help shape and help develop the next generation. Because we can't just assume that people know certain things and know how Islam has grown in America and know how Islam has improved America and has laid the groundwork and the foundation for a better America. So again, it's not to say that I'm perfect or that my upbringing was perfect or that the people who were around me were perfect. It's just simply to say that each of us has a responsibility to teach. And whatever way we can. Sometimes we'll teach from the position of expertise, what we go out and learn in the university. We'll teach from the position of ilm that we learn, at the madrasa. And sometimes the best teacher is our own experiences. If we articulate them well, if we are honest about our shortcomings, how we overcame them, our shortcomings and how they shaped us, how they impacted the people around us. Because if I can make a mistake, and then our young brother here doesn't make the same mistake, then inshallah ta'ala, that mistake will have been a blessing long term. We have to think about the next generation. We have to think about how to better approach what it means to be Muslim in America. It's not enough to just say I'm Muslim and I'm not American. I'm Muslim and I'm ignoring the fact that all of these things are happening around me. All of these temptations are around me. We are all of these things. And Islam was never meant to be an island. It was never meant to be isolated. Islam was always meant to be something that incorporated the culture as long as it didn't go against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as it didn't go against the sunnah, right? So it's not haram to be American. It's not haram to be in America. It's not haram to participate in any culture as long as it doesn't go against Islam directly. So, we start with, if we're talking about people who inspire and the people who give us the things that we'll need, the tools that we'll need to be successful. One of the lines that's in the book, it says, daddy issues are the root of all issues, right? And it's not just issues, but the father is the foundation of a family. The father is the foundation of a community. We can't have communities without families. We can't have families without fathers. And I was raised in a place where fathers were not around for a lot of families. There might have been one father to every 4 households. So we had to look outside for examples of what manhood was, or what it meant to lead, what it meant to teach, what it meant to discipline, to inspire, all of the things that a father brings to the table. And I've seen the approaches that work. I've seen the approaches that didn't work. I've seen the impact of presence of a man and the impact of the absence of a man, right? So the only thing that I could do, alhamdulillah, I had a father. My father, again, he took his shahada in 1968. I don't know if you guys know who Sheikh Khaled Yasin is, but if you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, he has a big following on those platforms. He's an elder man, has a red beard. He's got the henna in his beard. He talks very directly. He's from New York, so he speaks frankly. And he's got a great following. He's the one that gave my father shahada in New York City in 1968. So that's how long he's been at it. That's how long he's been at it. And that was straight to al-Islam proper, as we know it. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. No filter, no chaser. And that's what my father came into. He started out, and I'll back up a little bit, because this is incredulous. This is unbelievable to some people, that my father was born in a town called Itta Bena, Mississippi. Itta Bena, Mississippi, he was born on a plantation, a cotton plantation in Itta Bena, Mississippi. And in 1951, his parents took him and his brother, and they escaped from this plantation. So my father had to escape from a cotton plantation. Think about that. We often think about the plight of black people in this country, and we think about slavery like it's 400 years ago, like it's 200 years ago. But I don't know what else to call a plantation that a black person had to escape from in Jim Crow, Mississippi, other than a slave plantation. So that's how close we are to some of the illest parts of our nation's history. My father, one generation removed, he's still alive. I can call him right now. That's how close we are to these perils, this thing that we're still fighting against to this day, right? But that was not even close to being the most dangerous thing that he faced. They escaped Mississippi. They went to Indianapolis, Indiana. In Indianapolis, he was a very rebellious young man. He didn't like his given name, Larry Moore. He said it was the name of an oppressor. It was the name of a slave driver. So he changed his name. First to Hodari Maskini, which means brave poor. But he was always seeking the truth. He was always seeking guidance. So he went through all of these different changes. The Vietnam War, between the 40s and 1973, the United States government would draft people to fill its ranks. They would draft people to be soldiers. And when he got a letter that said, Uncle Sam wants you. That's what they used to do. Uncle Sam wants you. And then you just had to go. It's like being picked for the NBA. Now all of a sudden you got to do a layup. But they give you an interview. So he was like, I'm going to bomb this interview. I'm going to go to this interview and I'm going to make sure I fail. I'm going to flunk this test, right? So he picked his afro out, put his pick in it, put his dashiki on, put his black glove on, and talked real crazy to those people. I want to kill everybody. I want to kill everybody. I want to kill Whitey. I want to kill whoever. And they's like, you know what? You're a little too excited about this. You're not fit to serve. So he escaped by acting majnoon, by acting crazy. But it put a big target on his back. It put a target on his back by the feds, by the police, and he felt it. So he said, I got to go. I've got to seek truth. I've got to seek what's right. Because we know that he didn't feel like the Christian faith was truth. The idea that a man has to be put between him and his Lord never sat well with him. So he went to New York. He found Khaled Yasin. He took the Shahada, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. They named him Masood Abdul-Haqq, right? So this is 1968. They teach him the deen as best they knew how. They teach him everything that he needed to know. And then after they'd given him everything he needed to know, he taught how to write Arabic. They taught him a lot of the fiqh that they believed, that they understood. And then they sent him back home. They said, go back to Indianapolis and teach Islam there. Because it's not enough to just learn. It's not enough to just be a student. We also have to, at some point, teach. We know people now to this day, muhaddith. We know people who are sheikhs, people who are extremely learned, went to Egypt, went to Medina, went to Damascus and learned, and they come back and they're church mice. They don't know how to teach. They don't know how to impact. They don't know how to reach the hearts of the people. And then there's somebody who only knows Al-Fatiha, and they're able to impact and reach people and live out that Al-Fatiha. But alhamdulillah, my father was given more than Al-Fatiha, less than a muhaddith, but they told him, go to Indianapolis. And then what he would do at that time, he played the flute. So he went to the parks in Indianapolis. He would play the flute, and people would see him. He's dressed like he wears a turban. To this day, he still does. If you walked in here, you'd be like, it looked like Musa alayhi salam. He would wear this turban, and wear a thobe and wear, he'd look weird to people in the 70s in Indianapolis, Indiana. Indianapolis is a stronghold for the Ku Klux Klan, for you guys who don't know. So it's very strange to see this dark man in a turban and a staff and a thobe playing a flute in the park. Like, what is going on here? What's happening? Let me go ask him. And they'd come and they'd talk to him, and he would tell them who he used to be, who Larry Moore was, a feared brute, a fighter, somebody who would run toward danger in the streets, a rebel, somebody who went and defied the army, who dodged the draft with his mind. But this beautiful religion of Islam reformed me to the person that you see today. And many of those people said, SubhanAllah, in their way, right? And they would come and they would sit next to him. And then more people would sit next to him. They would take their shahada. And the masjid, he established a masjid with these brothers. These brothers established a masjid called Masjid Al Fatr. It's the first one in the state of Indiana, and it's still thriving until this day, alhamdulillah. So we see the benefit, how it can reform, how Islam can reform, how it can transform people, anybody of any walk of life, people with any kind of, affliction or temper, things of that nature, if we apply it properly. It's ironic, like not the next one, I have Houston next, and then after that, I have Indianapolis at Masjid Al Fatr. I was a part of this tour right here. So life comes full circle, alhamdulillah. But we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to seek truth, and we have a responsibility to teach the truth once we have it. So my father, he was a part of the Tablighi Jamaat, right? We learned about the Darul Islam movement had two factions, one that wanted to stick with the Tablighi Jamaat, and the ones that didn't. Who in here has seen or is familiar with the Tablighi Jamaat? Who's been visited by the Tablighi Jamaat? Right? So the Tablighi Jamaat, I grew up in the Tablighi Jamaat, right? So, it's a lot of great things about the Tabligh, right? A lot of great things. But, as a young child growing up in the Tablighi Jamaat, there were some things that were very, embarrassing and very difficult for me to do. They have this thing called Jola, right? So the Jamaat, they come to the masjid, they try to find a brother who's amenable, who's warm, and they say, hey, brother, come here, show me the other brothers who haven't been coming to the masjid. Where are they? Take me to their locale. They say, take me to their houses. And they get that brother, and that brother be like, okay, I'll take you to their house, unannounced, right? I'm gonna take you to the house. And we'd show up at these houses, knock on doors, and then brothers in all forms of Iman, right? In different stages of Iman. Iman, it ebbs and flows. It comes up and down. But they still believe. They're still Muslim. It's just some of them may not have been ready for the Jamaat to show up on their doorstep. So sometimes, we'd have brothers trying to light incense to cover up a certain smell. We'd have brothers throwing a curtain over their girlfriend. We'd see all phases, all stages of Iman, all stages of Islam. And I used to be so embarrassed for these people, right? And but it let me see that my dad is not like every Muslim, right? This Musa alayhi salam looking guy and his friends, this isn't everybody. There are people who are Muslim that do things that I didn't think any Muslim did, right? And but it also exposed me to other cultures. It exposed me to other cuisines, other languages. We would eat biryani. We thought that was a normal part of our cuisine. And we'd eat maqluba and things like that. And sometimes when people would talk to us and you find yourself doing this, it's like we were just a part of the community, right? We were just, I didn't understand what that meant. Now I understood what that meant. We were a part of the community. And some of their children, our age, they would look at us like, wow, you guys are Muslim? I'm like, yeah, we're just like you. We were born Muslim just like you. We're here just like you. We'd be at the ijtimas around the country, around North America. And we'd be on what the Jamaat calls khidmah, right? So khidmah is when you just do the different tasks that the masjid needs. We'd sweep, we'd clean up, we'd make the chai, right? The chai is never from water. It's always, the milk base, the carnation milk, and then put a bunch of sugar in there. You make it piping hot. So we understood how to do all these things. It was a part of our culture. And it was a beautiful thing because it allowed us to be more worldly, more exposed, more open-minded. It allowed us to have a wider palette, right? I always see children like this running around, and it makes me smile because we were those children. And I remember what it felt like to be that child and to be running up and down those ranks, and the ranks are formed, and they're running up and down. And then there was that one person who'd be like, "Blah," right? Stop the kid. It's like, let the kid play, man. If you don't have children in your community, you'd be praying for children in your community. So it's like we take these things for granted. And then we get upset and mad when it's a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have youth. There's so many works of art, fictional, things that these dystopian worlds where there are no children, right? Because a world without children is a world without a future. Like if there's nobody going to be here in 50 years, half the things that we do, we would just stop doing. It'd be no point. It'd be sad. It'd be drab. But I remember being that kid and loving the masjid because of that freedom of being able to go down the ranks and look up at people and they couldn't do anything to me. And they had to ignore me, right? So growing up Muslim in America was a beautiful thing, right? Being a part of a Jamaat that traveled all over the world, all over North America was a beautiful thing. We saw my father take risks to get us to Ijtima. I remember one that was in Toronto, and we were coming from probably Atlanta at that point. But we didn't have passports. My brother and I didn't have passports. My father said, "Oh, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. We'll get you through the border." He threw a sheet over us in the back of this van, and then he just smiles at this person at the gate, and they just let him through. Allahu Akbar. So we get to see all of these different things. We get to see what's working. We get to see, what works well. And, eventually we get to see the end of those things, right? My father was, who in here has seen the movie Muslim? This one came out a while back. Maybe not people that have seen it. My friend Qasim Bashir, he made it. And it's about like 9/11 and how it changed the way people see Muslims. But in that, there's a man, he's a man who's a lot like my father. And his whole thing was, my son will be a hafiz of the Qur'an, right? By all means. Like this was his main goal. Because if my son is a hafiz, he gets to pick 10 people to go to Jannah. Surely he'll pick me, right? And this was my father. He wanted me to be a hafiz of Qur'an, right? So he put me in hifz school. First, they tried to put me in one that was in Ontario. There's two of them up there. I'm not going to say which one it was. But one of them was like a old tuberculosis hospital, right? And they didn't change much from when it used to be a hospital. They were the same beds, very dark and scary looking place, right? And the sheikh there, the main teacher, he chewed a lot of pan. You guys know what pan is, right? Like, so he chewed pan, this red stuff, his teeth always red, kept pan in his mouth all the time. And he was very, very mean. He didn't smile ever. You'd only see his teeth when he was yelling at you. When you make a mistake, he had a ruler, like a yardstick. Pow! So you associate the learning of the Qur'an with punishment and like anger. And it didn't work for me at all. I was there for about 2 weeks and I bypassed Abu completely. I'm not calling that dude because he put me here. Umi, get me out of here. I can't do this. This guy, they beat you for everything. They punish you for everything. I have to go. I'm going to hate the Qur'an if they continue to treat me like this. I don't feel right. This isn't good, right? My white little kameez that I have on had little red dots all over it from his pan. Ba, 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 ba. I would have been left, right? So I got the right lawyer for the case. Ummi, she got me out of there, alhamdulillah. But then they put me in one in Atlanta called Darul Uloom. And the sheikh was the opposite. His name was Sheikh Abdul-Haqq. And see, I could tell you his name and the name of the school because it was all great. He was a beautiful man, very, very compassionate, very humble. And he encouraged you to learn the Qur'an by basically pitting you with your peers. You're at half a page a day. Noor, he's doing a page a day. And you're like, what? Noor's doing a page? Man, I'm doing a page and a half. I'm trying to get to a page and a half. So there's a beautiful, healthy competition to learn a page a day. And when you get to a page a day, then now you want to do a page and a half. The people who are doing 2 pages a day, mashallah. Like, those people, I can't catch you, but I admire you. And then it became, all right, well, I can't catch you in how much I'm memorizing, but maybe my recitation will be more beautiful. So now we're competing for beautiful recitation, right? And we're competing. The first one who was up, for Fajr, got to call the adhan. And we would compete to have the most beautiful adhan. We 11, 12 years old. So it gave me an opportunity to see, again, more people from all over the place. We had Pakistanis there. We had Arabs there. We had Somalis there. We had a Somali teacher named Brother Mahdi. He was like 6'7", and he probably had like a 7-foot wingspan. And he had the yardstick too, though. He was the enforcer there. And we used to make fun of him sometimes when we were younger. And he had a very distinct recitation. And his favorite surah was Surah Balad. And he'd be like, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد. And we'd be like, we're little kids, right? So we try not to laugh. And then after, who said this? Who said this? And we'd be like, but this is like good-natured stuff. It's a part of our culture, So now then when we have people that we're in school with, we see people from all different backgrounds. We have people who came from affluent backgrounds, people who came from poor backgrounds. And we understood that we all had the same curriculum. We were studying Qur'an. We were trying to learn how to basically be imams and be leaders in the community. But then once we leave there, we had to face the reality of being in this world, right? The people who had, homes that were loving and caring and nurturing, alhamdulillah, a lot of them took a straight path from that time to being leaders in the Muslim community, to being imams and being directors of Muslim organizations and things like that. But then there are others who had to go to a place where we had to survive, right? So I grew up in a part of Atlanta called the West End community. And the leader of that community was a man named Imam Jamil Al-Amin, formerly known as Hrap Brown. And for people who don't know who Hrap Brown is, so in the civil rights movement, there was probably like Martin Luther King, everybody knew him, Malcolm X, and then Hrap Brown was probably just a tier beneath them. He was a very fiery speaker. He was very, what they considered to be radical because he didn't sugarcoat anything. He would call the oppressors oppressors. He would call them outside of their names. He would be very adamant that if people wrong you, then you stop them from wronging you by any means. And that's not that word, by any means necessary. His main phrase that everybody remembered was violence is as American as cherry pie, right? This is who he was. He was America's most wanted at one point. And he went to prison because of that. And when he came out, he took Shahada there. And when he came out, he started a community. And that militancy, that forcefulness, what it did was it allowed him to establish that community in the middle of a very bad neighborhood with drugs, with violence, with prostitution, all of these different things in there. But the Muslim kids, us, we had like a protective force, like a force field around us. They knew we were with him, they left us alone. Right? But that didn't mean that we didn't see these things. We weren't exposed to these things. And the people who really wanted to be rebels, that stuff was still available to us. So I saw people who I went to school with, they became Hafiz of Qur'an, but they were also drug addicts. They became Hafiz of Qur'an, but they were apostate. They became Hafiz of Qur'an, but they were jaded by the process that it took to become that rote learning. Hafiz of Qur'an, but I don't understand anything that I learned. It didn't do well for them, you know? So I was able to see how this happened. I was actually one of them. I had to make decisions. I didn't always make the right decision because I was exposed. Like, in order to get to the masjid, I had to walk past drug dealers, walk past temptation. I saw my first dead body when I was 14 years old. And I knew that person. I had an idea who did it. And I had no inclination to call the police. That's the type of world I was in. So it's like I still had all of this deen in me, all what I learned from the Leakage Jamaat, all that I learned from my father, all that I learned from the sheikh, all that I learned from the Qur'an, from Hifz school. But still, I had to live in America. I was a goldfish, innocent, right? Dropped into a piranha tank. So I had to make a decision. Like, do I continue to be a goldfish or do I have to pretend to be a piranha so I can survive this? So during that time, I fought a lot. I hung out with drug dealers. I was always the good one in that situation, but I was still there, right? It rubs off on you after a while. The longer you impersonate something, the longer you pretend to be something, the longer it actually becomes who you are. So I started to actually kind of almost be a piranha, in a sense. But my fitra was strong. Islam was in me. I just had to survive that situation so that I could become someone who could take those experiences and teach somebody how to not make the same mistakes, how to not put themselves in the same positions that I was in. So Islam in America has done two things. It has freed people mentally who needed to free their mind, but also it's given people order who needed order, who were too wild. And that's that beautiful balance that I talked about in the khutbah. That's the balance that we seek for our children. We want to expedite that journey from this is what I'm teaching you to this is what I am in our children. So we tell these stories not to brag or not to be to show off or anything like that. You know, it takes a lot to admit certain faults. But if they help another person, if they help another generation avoid some of the pitfalls, then inshallah ta'ala, it'll be worth it. So that's the basis of this story. In 2021, and I'll wrap up pretty soon, and I'm going to talk to some of you guys. In 2021, it was like February 1st, and I got on Facebook or something like that, and I saw a bunch of black and white photos of Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and all these people. Black History Month. We know it all too well. And I kind of got a little annoyed, I'm not going to lie. Because sometimes as black people, we don't, it's like you're insinuating that the best of us was way back then. That there's nothing good or exemplary from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s right now. And I said, alhamdulillah, Allah took me out of that situation and has put me in a place now where I'm the chairman of the board at the Council of American Islamic Relations of Oklahoma. Of American Islamic Relations, that part, I feel like I'm uniquely equipped to bridge that gap between American and Islamic relations. I'm the chairman of the board at Masjid Mu'min, the oldest masjid, one of the oldest masjids in the state of Oklahoma, right? And I'm able to lead these organizations because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken me out of something, but I learned something from that, right? So I'm surrounded by a bunch of exemplary people, of fascinating people, of interesting people. And I decided to write an essay a day about those people and extract a principle that's universal to anyone seeking success, to anyone. And that became one essay a day for that whole week, for that whole month. And then people wanted it. It was almost 50,000 people following it by the end of it. And they asked me to make it a book. I said, okay, finally, I agreed. But then when I put it together, it was only 60 pages. I didn't want to come out with a book that was 60 pages. There's nothing against people who might have a book that has 60 pages. But I wanted to tell the story of what they inspired me to do and from what? To tell an arc. And that's what came of this book. And I tell some of those stories I just told you and more. And, you know, we see a lot of non-Muslims loving it. We see a lot of Muslims loving it. We see, a great response, alhamdulillah.